All right, folks, welcome to Interface. Today's presentation is going to be Bringing Life to Death, Green and Holistic Funeral Choices. It's a presentation on a water cremation, which is a way of disposing of our bodies when we're done with them in a way that's ecologically friendly and good for the earth, perhaps a way of making us a valuable contribution to the earth rather than something else. And we have two speakers today who are going to tell us about that. Karen Van Vuuren is a former journalist. She's a co-founder of Colorado's first holistic funeral home, and it's called The Natural Funeral. thenaturalfuneral.com is her website, and they're located in Lafayette. And 20 years ago, Karen founded this nonprofit, Natural Transactions, to provide education about holistic and natural end-of-life choices, including green and natural death care. And for 10 years, she edited the organization's magazine. She led regular workshops and was co-founder of the National Home Funeral Alliance, as opposed to the National Funeral Home Association. And homefuneralalliance.org is the website that represents that. Karen's also a documentary maker, and she's done some award-winning hospice films, such as Dying Wish, which is about a dying doctor's decision to stop eating and drinking, and Go in Peace, about supporting caregivers working with the terminally ill veterans with PTSD. And then also with Karen is Seth. Seth Viddal. Seth began his career as an intelligence communication specialist in the Air Force before working in the field of information technology in the private sector. And he spent a decade consulting on wide area networks for intelligence communities deployments before shifting careers and founding a real estate development company and then a commercial and industrial construction firm. And then Seth's life took another turn when his younger brother Sam completed suicide in 2015. And his mother died suddenly and unexpectedly in early 2016. He sold his businesses and went back to school to study end-of-life care, environmentalism, and social justice issues with a dream of creating a nature-based hospice service in Boulder County. An internship at the Natural Funeral Group in 2019 during his final semester at Naropa revealed a match made in heaven for him. Now he gets to do his favorite things. Love endlessly on his family and community, bring environmental innovation and compassionate death care to clients, and nurture a mission-driven business to maturity. So please welcome our speakers today. And so let's go ahead and talk a little bit about have the speakers do their presentation. After, we're going to do some breakout sessions during the presentation, and then there'll be a community dialogue at the end. Okay, and we'll do a closing when it seems appropriate to do that. So please help me welcome Karen and Seth as they present their presentation for the day.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. We feel similar enthusiasm to our arrival with your group this morning. And let's see. I think I'm gonna share our screen because we do have a little presentation. It's we hope you'll find it fun. And this is some topics that we're pretty passionate about sharing about. So I appreciate the introduction, and I want to continue that. And Karen and I want to tell you a little bit about why we do what we do, because it's perhaps equally as important to the services we deliver as the energy that creation is anchored in. And so Rich shared with you that I've actually had several careers in things that do not have to do with care of people at the end of their lives. I've done high technology configuration and sales, and for a while did construction and development of real estate. And what happened was, in my own life, several deaths that were expected, like those of my grandparents, I got to walk alongside their and follow their timeline as they were entering a cycle that included hospice and included palliative care. It included a slowing down of their cycle, and there was really a vision towards their death transitions. And it was very meaningful to me to connect with them and participate in the really heightened presence that becomes a part of those conversations when we're aware that our own mortality is in the room and a part of the conversation with us. And I grew during that time period, but it was really the unexpected, the sudden losses in my family, which I had a younger brother named Sam who completed suicide in 2015. And something really struck me about the suddenness of that, and my own need to process that, and the care that we intersected at that moment. And in planning for my brother's funeral services and planning for what would happen with his body and how we would honor that moment and memorialize him, I really didn't have anything much to compare that to. I went along with the plan that was presented to us, but along the way, nothing felt really complete. It felt like we were following a script of how you behave when someone dies suddenly, as opposed to really looking the scenario in the eye completely and doing something that was meaningful to him in that moment. And then in 2016, my mother died very suddenly on March the 30th of 2016. And again, I entered this process maybe just a little bit older, but not a whole lot wiser as to how I needed to, really what services would have been meaningful to me at that time. And I knew that there was something special. There's a way to serve families that honors this moment in a way that's really meaningful, but I couldn't find it available. And so I, at the time, had a pretty large construction firm. It's still based out of Aurora, Colorado today, and operates in a few states. And I realized that every day when I got up to go to work, following these really significant deaths in my life, that I wanted to do something that served that. I wanted to do something that met families when they experienced a moment of loss, and I wanted to provide something different. I didn't know what that was, or even really have a concept about what it could be. But I knew that every day when I got up and I went to work to plan to another building, it just didn't feel authentic. And it felt like there was work that was calling to me that I was to go on a mission to find. And so I, with the support of my family, sold that business and went back to school. And I entered school in my mid 40s with a plan to find out what gift I was to give in this world. And along the way, I discovered that there's a lot of breadth in this end of life care, which I know many of you on this call today are a part of service on that spectrum of care. And I wanted to find something there. For me, that's where all my questions were leading. And I had somewhat decided that with a background in construction that I was going to build a hospice facility on some land in Boulder County. And maybe it wouldn't be hospice, maybe it would be some sort of end of life care, but I wasn't sure at that point. And so I've actually pursued that for some time, exploring that. And in the last semester, when I was going back to school, I decided I need to find the type of funeral home that could serve these families that I'd like to build this dream for in a way that I intend to serve. And so I set out to find who's doing really heart-based work in this space. And I encountered quickly in Boulder County, if you're searching for people in the natural death care movement, Karen's name was recommended. You should reach out and see what she's doing. And I found out that Karen and another partner, Dan, were in the final stages of opening up the natural funeral. It wasn't quite yet open, but in my last semester and just prior to the opening of the natural funeral, I was blessed to intersect with an internship here. And in a short amount of time, I think I fell in love with this section of the care that happens at the end of people's lives. And I realized that I have something to offer in my willingness to be transparent and vulnerable around these conversations with families. And I fell in love with this kind of work in a way that I didn't really expect. And so my wife, my family, and I sort of paused our plans to build a facility on property and said, let's explore how we can serve this section of the population. Because there are some great things going on here. Innovation in environmentally sensitive practices. And it was really a lovely style of care. And so that's how I met the natural funeral. And that's somewhat of my introduction. And so before we get into some of the ways that we deliver on our services, I just wanted you to know who I am and why it's so meaningful to me. And then I'd like to pause and shift and bring Karen Van Vuuren into the conversation and allow her to expound on her intro.
Thank you, Seth. Thank you, everyone who is here on this Zoom. It's always a joy for us to speak about the work that we are so passionate about. I'm someone who also came from a different background originally to this one that I find myself in now. I was a journalist in my 20s. I was a broadcast journalist and a newspaper journalist, and had no inkling that I was going to be working in end of life. It just wasn't on my radar. And yet when I had my children in my early 30s, I really began to think very much about my brother Dirk, who died when he was 9 years old. And his death was one that really was not marked significantly in our family. My mother went to his cremation. I think she might have had a friend with her, but I was 2 years older, and he had a lifelong illness. He had been born prematurely in a hospital in Toronto, Canada, where I was actually born. And they, I guess he was in the hospital and contracted hepatitis as a baby, along with a number of other babies. And, you know, I don't know the story behind that. My parents were working class people who didn't ask questions and very much just sort of accepted what came to them and dealt with it as best they could. So he had hepatitis and was not expected to survive as a baby, and he ended up living for 9 years. But after a surgery, which I don't know what that was about, to investigate what was going on with his liver, perhaps, he came out of that and was predicted to be severely, as we said at the time, mentally and physically disabled, and had a very compromised liver, and really throughout his 9 years of life was in a lot of pain, such that my father would be up at night with him, where he was screaming, like bowel movements were excruciating for him. And I mean, this sweet being that never got to be verbal and was able to laugh spontaneously at things that nobody else would laugh at. You know, you'd knock over a glass of water on the table, and his name was Dirk, and Dirk would just be in paroxysms of laughter, and it was so magical. But then there was the other side where he was screaming in pain. So I grew up witnessing this, and I wouldn't say it wasn't like it was traumatic for me. It was just what life was. Like, my brother was needing a lot of care. He learned to walk when he was 5, and then I remember trying to teach him to speak, but he never really, I think, mastered. He maybe said, I might be kidding myself about this. I think he said mama or dada at some point. Anyway, his death happened in a hospital, in an ICU. He was there for months before he died. He had started on very much a downward turn, and was pretty emaciated and organs not functioning properly. I was not allowed to see him because at that time children were not admitted into these facilities, and I don't think my parents thought it was a good idea. My dad was the one who devotedly went to visit my brother every day and holding down a full-time job, and was up at night with him. So I actually got to witness incredible love and devotion for this child, who, when he died, it was a phone call that came one day. We were standing in the hallway of our home in London, which is where I grew up. My mother was from England, my father from the Netherlands, and it was a phone call that came and said, Dirk has died. And my dad passed that information on to us and said, that's life, we got to get on with it. And so, this child, I'm sure he had some spiritual guides with him, but he had none of his family with him, and he departed, and his life, those 9 years, weren't really marked in any way. There was no support. My mother had, she was having a nervous breakdown before he died, but she really fell apart when he died, and my parents divorced, etc., etc. Anyway, I didn't cry. I went to school the next day. I think a teacher said, oh, we heard about your brother. And I said, yeah, thank you. He had left long before his death. So as I said, it wasn't on my horizon. It wasn't part of my career plan to work in end of life, but I've totally been guided and steered all along the way since I had my children to work with end of life. Even when I thought, oh well, I'm going to diverge now, and I have done documentaries, and Rich mentioned 2 of those, and I thought, oh yes, I won't be doing so much hands-on. I'm not going to have encounters with people, and yet it's I'm always coming back to it, and so there's a lot to say about between having this connection with my brother, who is, I believe, my spiritual guide, saying, do this work on behalf of me, in my name, do this work to bring options, to bring choices that connect people into something that we're all gonna face, and allow some perspective, some healing, some meaning to come from this death. And there's a lot between coming to that realization that yes, it's my work, and opening the Natural Funeral, which involves starting a nonprofit. Natural Transitions was the nonprofit I started in 2003 to empower people to know what their choices are. In particular, I was very passionate about home funerals. which is the old way of doing things, really, in many cultures, right? Before there was an industry, people stayed at home with their loved ones when they passed, and they were hands-on, and they had their own ritual, their own ceremony, and it really allowed them to be connected in with the death, and to integrate it and make their own meaning of it as well. And so I was very passionate about home funerals. I don't know, I've assisted with many home funerals, countless, I don't know, hundreds. and I think we call it unearned intimacy in this work we do in the natural funeral. That's a term I think that Seth came up with. So, you know, being in that place of sharing this unearned intimacy with families, sometimes for just a few hours, is an amazing honor, and it's humbling. And the natural funeral is a manifestation of 20 years of work to build a vision. And then Seth and a partner who is not on this call, Dan, they are absolute pillars of this edifice that we have created with the natural funeral, which is not just supporting people at home, but having a beautiful chapel, having a space with art. You can see our urns in the background. They're all made by artists, all our cremation urns. It's one of our core values that we support independent artists, and we're not selling mass-produced products from places that are strange and unknown to us. So we're going to give you a little tour. It's a very short minute and a half glimpse of the funeral home. We did think of walking around with a computer, but I think this is probably better. And so we're going to give you a taste of what the natural funeral looks like. You want to say anything more about the center?
Well, I hope that in that brief glimpse of our center that you're able to tell that there's a lot of intentionality placed in the container that we've created for families to arrive, and that's based on a lot of experience by just trying to elevate what we've each encountered in our times being on the client side of encountering funeral services. And so we've really spent a lot of time being very intentional around the space we've created. And so now I think we're going to evolve the conversation into the services that we offer both in families' homes and at the space that we just showed you. And we are going to focus a lot of this presentation on water cremation and on some natural, some of our forms of disposition that are very environmentally focused. But we do want you to get a breadth of the services that are very unique to our style. So Karen is going to talk about a service that we provide called Reverent Body Care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, reverent body care is actually a term that we just trademarked for years. When I ran my nonprofit Natural Transitions, one of the hallmarks of the service, and it was under the auspices of a nonprofit, was this home care and this hands-on ceremonial honoring, blessing of the departed after the last breath. And I'd show up in people's homes. Hopefully I had met people beforehand and we created an after death care plan. We'd sat down and we talked about what are your beliefs around what happens after the last breath. What are your beliefs? What is your loved one's belief around that? And what is your understanding of what might be supportive for that soul, spirit, energy, whatever you want to call it, so that it can move on from this world and go on its journey. And how do we do that? Bringing in beauty, bringing in the love that can really uplift a space. And what is your comfort level around that? Do you have questions about what happens when somebody has died? How is the body going to change? How do we keep this person at home so that they're as quote unquote intact physically for the duration of the vigil or the wake? And so I worked with families who were doing what has come to be known as home funerals. As I said, that was primarily under the nonprofit, my focus. And ultimately, it culminated in, after a number of national conferences, in the formation of the National Home Funeral Alliance, which is an organization that unites people around the country and also internationally to advocate for and educate about natural home-based family-directed death care. So I just had this experience of a couple of decades of being with families, showing up as a guide, right? Which is I would say quite different from the typical funeral director role, which is we've taken care of everything for you, so you don't have to do anything. We've prepped your person in a way that is deemed sanitary, and we are presenting them as maybe in their suit, and there isn't the connection with their body after death. And my role with the nonprofit was always to co-create with a family and to be there and to say, here's a washcloth and this is your loved one, and invite them to be in a role that it used to be very familiar, right? This is what we did. We washed our loved ones when they died and we laid them out. Or there might have been a wise person in the village who came to assist, but it really was within the confines of the home and the family and the community. And so in offering this service of Reverent Body Care, now in the context of being a funeral home, we actually get to really have a much better opportunity to change or reintroduce cultural practices that have been lost. I mean, when I operated as a nonprofit executive director and went out and helped families, that was wonderful. And I got to, you know, serve a few dozen families a year. But now people come to our funeral home and they have never in their wildest dreams or thoughts considered, oh gosh, could I do something like that? Could I touch my person after they died? Could I be involved in a ritual washing and a dressing and an anointing? Because anointing is very much part of this. In many traditions, there is something of placing a sacred oil, anointing the body with a sacred oil like frankincense as a way to support the transcendence, the transition of the loved one. And it's the most surprising and heartwarming thing for me to have our families, our funeral home clients come through the door and they ask about cremation and burial, and we walk them through those disposition offerings, and then we say, and there's something before that happens, and it's called reverent body care. And then you have to paint a picture, right? We have a short video we're going to show you in a moment, but then you have to paint a picture of what that's like, because it's so not in their vocabulary. It's just unimaginable that you would have this encounter with your loved one. And we've done it with sudden death, which can be so profound if the circumstances of the death have been traumatic, and there is there's this image that is remaining with maybe a parent who has discovered their child who has ended their life, and then there's, oh well, I can't see them because the coroner is doing an investigation, and we have here at the Natural Funeral a beautiful beetle kill pine sacred space that has been ensouled and filled with the love of so many people now. And when you walk into it, you just feel the love, and it's a beautiful natural setting. We can have candles in glass jars, and we have silks, and that's a real contrast to perhaps what they saw, felt, and experienced when their loved one died suddenly. So those have been the most striking in their power. Those scenarios where a sudden loss family has been able to bring their loved one into our little beetle kill pine chapel and have ceremony and touch their baby and show appreciation and cry and beat drums and all of that. And we also support home funerals. So I haven't lost my love for, my goodness, the home is absolutely where the heart is. Let's support people going home. So we're going to show you a little video of one of our clients. It was a sudden death case, and Debbie Wilson is someone who's been out there in the world talking very much about her son's departure and wanted to share something about the reverent body care experience that she had.
Our friends and the Natural Funeral helpers were there to prepare his body, anointing him with natural oils, and even instructed me how to do that. It gave me more time to adjust and accept his death, and to touch him and to be with him. And that, I think, was very beneficial in my healing process. Jake was treated in a loving and honoring way. That whole week was so impactful and so powerful for both my husband and I, and for our older son, James. We would have never done it had Natural Funeral not been there to direct us and to lead us down that path.
Yeah, perfect. So we know we're going to be together for a good bit today, and we're about to move into another section talking about the types of disposition services, burials, and cremations that we offer to families. But before we do that, and recognizing that we're a dynamic group and that there are a lot of wonderful, creative hearts on this call, we'd like to try and pose a question to you now. And then we'd like to offer a little bit of space in a breakout room for some sharing to occur. And then our goal would be that we come back together, and you, if you choose, maybe a representative from the different breakout groups might just bring a few pearls that you discussed during your time together. So the question that we want to pose for conversation is, what rituals have you witnessed that have been meaningful for families when someone has died, whether in the presence of the body or soon after? And so, Rich, are you gonna from here maybe take us into, do we have enough folks to do some breakout rooms?
We do. And so everyone has to choose to go to the room that they're assigned to in order to get there. And then I'll give a signal to come back.
I think we'll break out for 10 minutes. Rich, is that okay?
Yep, sounds good.
Great.
All of the rooms are open now.
Yeah. So what rituals have you witnessed that have been meaningful for families when someone has died, either in the presence of the body or soon after?
Yeah.
I think we're still coming back. Yeah.
Yeah, we are still coming back. People do have to choose to come back, so they might take
I
some
hope
time.
they do choose. Don't leave us.
Karen, there wasn't a time to respond to your story and to Seth's introduction. I just want to say that I had a similar kind of experience with the death of my mother, and I thought there has to be a better way to do this. It just seems so inhumane, and I was moved to hear your story because I think it's sometimes the disruption in our lives that causes us to pay attention and to want to find some other solution than what we've experienced.
Yeah, adversity begets opportunity, or whatever
Creativity and inspiration, and yes.
Yeah. Could we share a screen again?
Yeah.
With you all.
Before we break into that, I wanted to see if anyone had anything that they could offer from their time spent in smaller groups. Karen and I got to participate with Deborah and Trina for a brief time. If either of you wanted to share about what we talked about, that'd be great. Or if any of the other groups, does maybe one representative just wants to share about something from their group that was meaningful ritual following death.
Barry?
Steph, do you want to share, or if not, I'll just summarize a little bit.
Yes, why don't you summarize?
Okay. So I asked Stephanie about what her experiences were in she was talking about a Jewish ceremony of staying with the body, or the casket, the body in the casket. And she did that with a few people that she knew locally in Boulder. And I shared about, in addition to spending time with my dad and his body when he passed in the hospice hospital for a few hours, when the rabbi came by and did some prayers, and also my memory of in India, when I lived in India, going to the Ganges, to the burning ghats, to witness, to hang on for hours and hours, watching the families bring the bodies, and the ceremony around preparing the funeral pyre and burning the bodies at the Ganges River. And Rich described his father being a minister that he witnessed, was around funerals and also in his experience with hospice in a Christian tradition. And Mr. Stephanie, do you want to add anything else to that? I don't think I did a very good job.
Well, you did a great job.
Yeah. I want to say during COVID, which called for a lot of imagination and creative thinking, right, around how do we mark this death, we actually did a reverent body care with participants in other states. So we were able to have this person in our chapel, and there were grandchildren, granddaughters, and a daughter in, I think, primarily California. And and we led it in the same kind of ceremonial way that, you know, it's an option. We can be there, or we can let families really lead their own ceremony. But in this instance, we had them on a computer screen, and we had a moment of silence, and then we invited a prayer or a poem from them. And then we were their hands. And so this was a matriarch who was on our table in the chapel. And it was, I had no idea that it could be so real somehow for people who are not in the room. And so we were doing the washing, and where should we do the feet now? Should we do the face? And no, go to the heart, like you should start with the heart. And then we did the anointing, and there was one granddaughter who played violin. There was one who spoke these words of gratitude. It was amazing. I actually am hopefully making a video about that one, because the woman who died also had crocheted her own shroud. Not knowing she was going to die suddenly, she started making this shroud because she'd taken up crocheting, and she wanted to really just test her skills. So she made this beautiful, colorful bag, and it had little birds on it. And so we put her in the bag at the end, this multicolored work of art. And yeah, it was one of the most memorable reverent body cares I've ever participated in. And then the feedback from the family was that was incomparable. They could not have imagined how that would have impacted us.
Yeah. Does anybody else want to share from the other group? It's completely optional, or we'll move forward if you want to.
I think Elaine was trying to say something. Elaine?
Question. Were you doing the body care for the family and they were nearby?
No, so they were on Zoom.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So there was a camera
Got it.
that
Yeah.
was showing us with the grandma and the mom. But we were communicating, and they were directing us, and which I thought, oh, that would have been an idea for the Hevra Kadisha in the Jewish community. I don't know what they were doing during COVID particularly, but this was a way to really still keep this ritual available to our families that we could even do it via Zoom.
That's okay. I didn't understand. Thank you.
And that's one expression of how this has turned out. In our group, we talked about how Zoom has become a part of funerals and death care, and even visits with our family members who we can't access because of restrictions from entering facilities. And so Zoom, that we didn't really think much about a year and a half ago, it's really become a valuable tool. And so the example Karen gave about the family being remote and us being the local hands, we've had multiple variations of that, where we've had families who a couple of people could be in the room with us, and we've had families that are international who would have, even in non-COVID times, probably logistically it would have just been too difficult to make it back here stateside to participate, but they've gotten to participate. And we, prior to the Zoom integration in the pandemic, it probably wouldn't have even manifest that way. But because it's so much a part of our consciousness now, how do we involve people using technology? It's just evolved into something that's absolutely beautiful. Yes.
Have you done the reverse yet, like where the body was in California and you were instructing them and giving them guidance on how to do reverent body care?
We have, I would say the closest thing that we've done is where we're just a part of the container. So we're in the room with families, and maybe there are a couple of people locally, and there are also people remotely, but our actual guidance or service in the room is we might be holding a camera so that the people who are remote can have a really good view of the person who's actively providing care. And we might simply suggest, like Karen says, shall we honor the feet at this point with a washing, or shall we honor the hands? And then we let the room and the people decide. And if they say, let's wash their feet, well, we might place the camera angle, and as the family begins to wash the feet, we might say, I'd love to hear where these feet have walked.
Oh, I love it.
Where have these feet served? Or as we're washing the hands, what hugs and embraces have those hands given? Or if it's a person of business and commerce, what business and contracts did this person bring into the world, right? Because or what instrument did those hands play? And we become just a part of the container, or the videographers, if you will, and we're just uniting the family by allowing that story to emerge.
I love that.
Yeah. Thanks for all the questions, and thanks for the.
Maybe we'll move on now. Seth, you could maybe speak about the green burial.
So here we go. We're gonna reshare our screen, and I'm going to we're gonna move now into the services which in the funeral industry are the disposition options, which are the choice that we eventually ask of all of our families is, what would be the most meaningful place for this beloved's body to go next. It's typically anchored into some belief that's either based in a spiritual belief or an environmental belief. I'm getting some.
It's gone.
I
think it was.
Oh, okay, perfect. No problem. No problem. We're there. So the natural funeral offers 4 main options for disposition, and within each of those, there are some variations in how we can provide each option. But the first that I want to talk about is burial. And at the natural funeral, it's our goal to to honor the requests of each family that walks through the door. So we have an idea of how a burial might look when the environment is a really presiding factor in the decision making. However, for each family, the environment's not always the leading cause for their decision making. It's often anchored into spiritual beliefs, which might inform this type of cemetery that they're buried in, or the type of casket that's used. So I want to start by saying that at the Natural Funeral, we've made a company decision. We do not offer embalming. Embalming is the chemical preservation of a body, typically using a formaldehyde-based ingredient whose goal is to preserve the physical decay of the body, and to present a certain condition of the appearance of the body. And we don't, just anchored in the roots of our corporate ethos, we feel that a real current actual physical condition is, in our experience, it's always been the most healing, real experience for those families in their integration with their loved one. So we've made a corporate decision not to offer that. So if we place a body in the ground for burial, it has not been embalmed. And we use other techniques for preservation, for keeping bodies cool, and for allowing some time to pass so that families can travel to, if they choose, to be with the body or to attend a burial. But know that embalming is just not a part of our practice. So when people ask about burial, they might come to us and already have a plot in a cemetery, and that cemetery might have rules about how burials occur. Perhaps it must be in a casket, or perhaps there must be a vault or a grave liner that surrounds the casket. However, we make it a point to let people know what things are optional and what is the actual purpose that they're serving, and what things are necessary and functional. And so we really want the choice to be in the hands of the family. So green burial is a really broad term, and depending on who you ask, it can mean a lot of different things. But I'm going to tell you what it means to the natural funeral is that the body is not embalmed, that the body is in as natural a container as possible. And what that often means at the natural funeral is a cotton shroud, or a bamboo shroud, or a pine box. And so we actually, we only have either those cloth shrouds or a cardboard casket that families often decorate, sign notes and attach pictures to and make beautiful art on. But we don't sell any caskets that have metal, that contain metal. We don't offer vaults or outer burial containers that surround caskets unless the cemetery has a requirement for that. And so without an emphasis on products being what you need to support that burial. So our graves tend to be at less depth, because in a natural cemetery environment, well, a traditional grave, if you think of it customarily being dug to a depth of 6 feet, the topsoil and the life, the root systems that exist are typically looking for nutrients in that upper 3 feet of ground. And so a burial that is occurring at 6 feet would likely never nourish the earth layer. And so we make our burials at a more shallow depth to enable the nutrients, then the minerals that are contained in our bodies to eventually become a part of that topsoil layer where plants can access that nutrient. So having to do with burials, I told you we support cemeteries corner to corner in the state, and we've actually we've helped people with if they have a cemetery out of state. We do natural death care in Colorado, including reverent body care, or and then we help the family with preserving the body, and we can ship that to anywhere in Colorado or out of state.
We've lost the sound.
And then in Colorado, can you hear me now? Can someone say if they can hear me now?
Yes, you're fine.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So we've identified cemeteries in the state that tend to offer more green options for burial. And so if a family comes to us without a connection to a cemetery, we can make recommendations. And we've also, cemetery has been around for about 150 years and has operated as a conventional cemetery for that time. And it's been a municipal and sort of family managed cemetery for close to 150 years. And we approached the cemetery and asked if we could purchase a corner section of their unused land to actually establish a green section within their conventional cemetery. And they actually thought it was a great idea. And the family that's managing this now is pretty innovative, and they know that the culture in Boulder County and in Lyons would really embrace this. And so we've made a deal just in the last year to purchase a section from that cemetery. And there we offer very natural, very green burials at 3.5 foot depth. We do hand lowering of bodies and shrouded bodies into the graves there. And we do hand filling of the topsoil back over. And it's been a lovely, lovely offering that families are beginning to embrace. But I just wanted to, that's most of all I have to say about burial. There will be a time for some questions later, but I just wanted to explain that it's an offering we've put a lot of thought into.
And those cemeteries, they typically have very natural, low resource usage landscaping practices. So that's one thing that would distinguish a real green burial cemetery from a conventional cemetery where there's a lot of water usage, there are pesticides, and it's much more manicured. Yeah.
So the next disposition option that we
had to include this really because it is the most popular choice for people at this time, even though when modern cremation first was introduced and the first crematory was in the US in 1876 in Pennsylvania, it was not welcomed and was not something that most people wanted to consider because of the associations from previous times of burning people at the stake, and that this was maybe even desecration of the body to burn someone. So it's not as if cremation was immediately a disposition form that people embraced. But in Boulder County, it's like more than 90% of the population that chooses this when they for death, for disposition. And yet, you know, there are certainly ecological repercussions which are not necessarily top of mind when you're making that choice. I mean, it's considered convenient, and yeah, it's, you know, can be less expensive. And yet you're putting CO2 into the atmosphere, you're using non-renewable fuels to power these gas-powered cremation retorts. And if you have something like amalgam in your teeth, which is mercury, it actually gets vaporized and that goes into the atmosphere, and along with other not so harmful substances. So it's not necessarily that we're all really cognizant of what cremation does environmentally. And yet, you know, we offer it because it's a choice that people expect to be able to have. And I cremated both my parents, and I actually didn't have any other choices, I don't think, where they were when they died. And I feel like it's good just to inform people, you know, and then we're not in a place of judgment. It's up to you to kind of judge your own actions and your own choices. So I think that's all I'm going to say about flame cremation. And then this was pretty much billed as the headline, pretty interesting and new form of disposition after we talked about water cremation. And I think I'm going to give a very brief introduction, and then Seth, who has actually participated in water cremations and performed them, can add to where I've left things out. So water cremation has been around.
Lost you again.
For more than 100 years. It was patented. Are we there? Are we back?
Yep, you're back.
No? Yeah, okay. Sorry about that. So water cremation has been around for more than 100 years. It was patented by
All right, we've lost you again.
British chemist called Amos Herbert Hobson. Yeah, we're not challenged. Just give us a minute here. See if it comes back.
Yep.
Okay.
We're back.
Shall I try? Okay,
Yep.
I'll try. Thank you for bearing with me. So water cremation has been around for more than 100 years. It was invented to basically return the bodies of deceased livestock to the earth in a way that would be most beneficial, right? So it's going to break down the body so then it can become this liquid fertilizer that then is enriching the soil. And it's been used for animal disposition. Veterinarians have used it for a long time, like since the beginning of the last century. And now we have more and more states that have legalized it. In Colorado, it's been legal since 2011. And the Natural Funeral had the first client to choose water cremation. And that was in 2019. In the summer of 2019, we sat down with someone who was on hospice, and we were with her because she was thinking about burial on private land, which, by the way, depending where you live, is possible. You just need to know about the zoning, and we have performed burials on private land. Excuse the noise in the background here. You're in a commercial setting. And this person who wanted burial on her land, she said, I just want to, we kind of looked at each other and thought, this is somebody who maybe is going to be very open to this new method of disposition, which is going to meet her needs. Where she lived, it was quite challenging. Like, we couldn't have got in equipment to dig, and there was a stream nearby. So there were some impediments to burying her on her own land. But she signed up to be the first person in Colorado to have water cremation, also known as alkaline hydrolysis, which I'm going to let Seth briefly describe, and then we're going to show you a very short video where some of our clients who've chosen water cremation, which is ecological cremation, speak about why they chose it and why it was meaningful.
Yeah.
So when you describe the process.
Yes, absolutely. So, and I think we're going to show a brief film as well. But alkaline hydrolysis is a process which is regulated as a form of cremation. It's regulated by the CANA, which the Cremation Association of North America, and did you say when it was legalized in Colorado?
2011.
Yep, 2011. And I stepped out just briefly, and so this process takes place inside of a vessel. The vessel is about the size and shape of a bathtub with a lid that encloses the container. And the process itself, we would probably address this differently if we were in an arrangement conference with a family. However, knowing that this is a technical presentation, I want to give you some of the science behind this. So excuse the terminology, and please recognize that there are different ways that we necessarily enter this topic based on the container we're in. So there's a vessel about the size of a bathtub, and into that vessel we place the body of the decedent, and one of them potassium hydroxide and one of them denatured alcohol. So natural based chemicals are added to the body. And then over the next 2.5 hours, the vessel, which is, like I said, shaped like a tub and is horizontal, it is gently rocked. So there are hydraulic arms that rotate the vessel 3 degrees downward, and then 15 seconds. And so for about 2.5 hours, there's a stainless steel vessel that has a gentle 6-degree rock. And over the course of that 2.5 hours, the body is bathed in a flow cycle, which reduces the soft tissue and the organs of the body. And at the end of the 2.5-hour process, we're able to open the lid to the vessel. And what remains are only 2 things. One is the liquid essence of the body, and the other is the bone remains of the body. So in this 2.5-hour period, all pathogens are removed from liquid and bone. They come out completely sterile. All toxins are removed. All pharmaceutical traces are removed. In fact, all DNA traces are removed. And the only thing that remains is the mineral nutrients that exist as the chemical makeup of our bodies. And what is really amazing about this is that the part of the body that remains in bone is what would remain at the end of a flame cremation as well. And so water or place in an urn. And so too, at the end of a water cremation, the bones are dried, reduced, and then returned to the family. What's really magical is that the liquid essence contains the phosphorus, the potassium, the nitrogen that already existed in our bodies, plus the potassium that was added chemically to actually help the process occur. And those are the 3 building blocks. The NPK are the fundamental building blocks, the macronutrients all plant life on Earth requires to grow. And so, in essence, what we've created is a liquid biostimulant. And our process 5 and 35 total gallons of liquid essence. And what we currently do is we encourage families to take a small amount of this back, just like they do with the urn bone cremains. And they might use that ceremonially on a plant that's meaningful to them as a stimulus, the same way that they would scatter ashes. And the remainder is we donate to farms. And those farms today are in the Boulder County area. They are typically farms that are growing brome grasses or alfalfas that are going to be used for pasture animals. Some of the gardens grow flowers. All of the distribution occurs on crops that are inedible. Not that there would be a scientific reason that they couldn't be used to stimulate those crops, but just from a public acceptance of this technology, we're taking baby steps and want to make sure that we're in the right place as each people integrate or come to accept this technology. So I think what I want to do next is maybe show you a video of that describes this process a little more, and then this would probably be a good place for us to consider some questions. Let me.
Well, actually, no, we're doing natural organic reduction and then questions.
Okay, a video to follow. Please enjoy.
Water cremation wasn't something that I knew very much.
Having audio issues, Seth.
But it was something.
Okay, now it's back.
The low carbon footprint of water cremation really appealed to me as a scientist, as a research meteorologist, because I'm well aware of the problems with our changing climate due to burning fossil fuels.
Doug died very suddenly and unexpectedly, but I was very comforted that the natural funeral was here. Doug composted everything. He gardened in the summer. And so to be able to return the remains of his body basically in the form of a fertilizer that would nourish the soil was really a blessing. It's a loving of life and an affirmation of life, even in the midst of a death.
Okay, thanks for watching that. And I do want to tell you that in 2019, after we served the first client, we purchased that as a contracted service from a person who had invented and created an alkaline hydrolysis system, enthusiasm about this ecological process, water crematory. And so the owners, Dan, Karen, and myself of the Natural Funeral, opened a facility called Alkaline Hydrolysis of Colorado. And we began this conversation today with the deeply personal connections that we each hold. And so we have a vision that other families and our families in the future have a type of death care that's very, very meaningful. And just like the Natural Funeral is that opportunity for clients in Boulder County, we realize we only are going to get the funeral home customers that come through our door, but there's a larger opportunity to provide alkaline hydrolysis if other funeral homes in the state can offer it. And rather than them having to take the leap of faith in this technology and buy a system and license a crematory, we decided to buy the crematory and offer this service to other funeral homes. So we actually provide this service to funeral homes in Grand Junction, Canyon City, and that's the way that we have exponentially expanded this offering to people well beyond who we could ever get through the doors at the Natural Funeral. And in a similar commitment, we've opened up another funeral home that's in downtown Denver, and it's called the Water Crematory. And its focus is on offering water cremation. And many of the people who find the water crematory, there's no consideration for another form of disposition. That's what they want. And actually next week, we are opening another funeral home in Colorado Springs, which is also called the Water Crematory. And its signature service will be water cremation. So I just wanted to speak to the emphasis that we've placed on this. And while we don't have attachment to which form of disposition a family selects when they find the Natural Funeral or the Water Crematory, we do lead with this offering because it's our best foot forward ecologically.
Maybe we should just take 5 minutes for natural organic reduction and leave the rest of the time for questions, because we're at,
I like it.
Yeah.
So this is a great idea. The very next thing that I want to share with you is this is an emerging form of disposition. Maybe you've heard of natural organic reduction, and maybe this is a new term to you. It is also referred to as human composting. Sort of the slang would be that. Natural organic reduction is a process where a human body is placed into a vessel and the natural process of composting occurs inside a vessel. And along with the body, a bulking agent is placed, typically straw or alfalfa or wood chips. And the body and that agent mixed with the oxygen creates an aerobic activity where all of it together becomes a soiled compost. And this was legalized for the first time in 2020 in Washington State. And about 4 weeks ago, Governor Polis signed a bill into law where this is now legal in Colorado. For the last 2 years, the Natural Funeral has sent representatives to the Energy and Environment subcommittees advocating for this bill to become an offering in Colorado. Not that we think every family needs to choose this, but because we believe that if a family wants a service and it's good for the earth, we'd like to offer it. And so about 2 weeks ago, myself and another teammate from the Natural Funeral visited Washington State. There are 3 operators there that are currently offering this. This is one of the operators from inside their facility. That system, this is in Seattle, Washington, and it's at a facility called Return Home. And what you're seeing there this is a an urban implementation of composting that can take place in a very dense metropolitan area. So it's a stacked vessel concept where this particular facility is about 11,000 square feet and has capacity to compost 74 individuals at one time in the same facility. And we also visited a much lower technology facility you might see in a yard. And the natural funeral at our water crematory in Arvada, we've begun building vessels. And so we offer natural organic reduction now, either through our partners, if a death were to occur prior to our vessels being complete, but we anticipate approximately 60 days from now that our vessels will be licensed inside of our facility to operate. And we're just excited about this because, as you can imagine, it has an extremely low environmental footprint, and the resulting compost is of benefit to wherever you take it. So those are the main disposition options offered at the natural funeral: green burial, flame cremation, water cremation, and now natural organic reduction. And we have talked a lot, maybe barrier rich, if there's a format for interactivity, we would encourage that. And we'd love to hear if you have questions about our center or Reverent Body Care or disposition, our personal stories, anything. Engagement is welcome.
Thank you both. This is a good moment here to make it a community dialogue, a discussion. And I just want to tell you how much I've learned here in the last half hour. I had no idea about what you just described or even existed, let alone even possible. So that was a rude awakening. The audio was unfortunately pausing and then catching up. So I think we got the gist of everything you were saying. And thanks for enlightening us on this dark topic. So I want to open it up to the rest of the folks who are listening in and watching. What's your reaction, response? What questions do you have? Comments?
I have a question, but I think that I should actually call natural funeral because it's maybe pretty specific. I told the people in my group that I have donated my body to the medical school. And so that complicates things a bit, but also if you die in certain ways, sometimes they don't want you. So you have to have a plan B. Okay.
It's always good to have a plan B.
Yeah. And then I have a friend who is terminally ill, and I don't think she's made any plans or knows anything about what's available around here. So I should get some materials from you.
Oh, I tell you what, I'm going to put in the chat. I'm going to type the phone number for the natural funeral. And also I said I'm going to take this moment to invite you to tea at the natural funeral. So whether you have an emerging need for death care or not, this is something we are very passionate about. You're all respected colleagues in the field of end-of-life service, and it's important to us that you feel welcome here and educated and empowered. And so I'm going to put our contact info in the chat, and we would love to set up a tea time with you to discuss your
super.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, actually, I should say tea is very much a ritual at the natural funeral, and I pretty much instituted that because of my background growing up. And every time when I was growing up, if you were upset about something and there's something on your mind, someone would say, oh, just let's have a nice cup of tea. And so we have a real tea set, a real teapot. We have china. It's actually Seth's grandmother's china that we have here. So we really do believe in elegance and yeah, showing you how we can serve you in the most elegant, respectful way.
I asked a question in the chat, and Sylvie asked the same question. What is the difference in the cost between the different disposition methods?
Yes. I'm going to tell you the prices at the Natural Funeral, which are different from our metropolitan offerings in Denver and Colorado Springs. At the Natural Funeral, flame cremation is $2,200. Water cremation is $3,900. Green burial is $2,900 plus the plot. So that's our services, but exclusive of the plot. And natural organic reduction is $7,900. I want to expand on that because the other prices that are real important for you to know, they're not how much an urn is, because they're either 100 or 200, and it depends on which one you pick. But what are important to know is that reverent body care is if we go into someone's home, we always bring a pair from the Natural Funeral, and then of course all of the supplies for natural death care, and that service is $1,400 for a Natural Funeral team to show up and lead that ritual in homes. And then the last price that I would think is very important for you to know is that a service, a memorialization service, including our celebrant, who we use a few celebrants and they are amazing. And those services are $750. And it doesn't matter if that's in person or on an international Zoom. It's just $750 for the memorialization.
And what about
Does that help?
What if you do the reverent body care at the Natural Funeral Home? How much is that?
$1,300. Yep. So it's $1,400 in community and it's $1,300 at the Natural Funeral.
Okay. How many do you do in
and that
homes
if we're going into the,
I can finish.
That's a great question. I would say in the last year, we've probably done this service 70 times, maybe 80 times. And I would say the ratio is probably, would you say it's 50-50? If you were?
A bit less.
In which?
Home. Still less home. But surprising, even though it's less home, it's way more than I would ever have predicted that people are doing it in their home. And the fact they're doing it in our chapel is, oh my God, it's incredible.
Maybe 60-40, maybe 60% of the people elect to do it here on our space, and 40% are empowered to do that at home.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there, I should suggest there's sometimes this occurs at a church if that's the most meaningful place for a family. And sometimes it occurs in a friend's home. There have been, I can think of half of a dozen scenarios in the last year where a person has died at an assisted living facility or a memory care facility. And our very first transport is not to bring them into our care, but to bring them back to their home where they lived before they entered the assisted living facility, so that their community can circle them there.
Would the assisted living facilities allow you to do the reverent body care there, or the nursing homes, or even hospitals? No?
In the last year, that's been tricky. I mean, in the last year, there have been spouses turned away, from even a simple visitation. So for the most part, and also because there's such an emphasis on the container and on beauty and story and music and verse and each other, that it makes sense as much as possible for us to minimize the medical influence over that ritual.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Hello?
Yes.
Okay.
Hello?
Hello. So the Jewish tradition involves cleaning the body and placing it in a winding sheet, and then burying within 24 hours, unless that 24 hours, well, burying before sundown the next day. Is your and there are members of the community who participate in that. Is that consistent with a green burial? Could you work around that?
Yes.
Is that something you could work around?
Well, we have served people in that way, where there's been a shroud, there's been a winding shroud, and then there's been a green burial. People who are from the Jewish community, we absolutely have worked with. The cemeteries in Boulder County, for the most part, require a vault, and for the Jewish community, they haven't said no vault. They've said, okay, we can have an upturned vault so the body is touching the ground, but still there is this cement covering over the grave. There are a couple of cemeteries that don't require that, and one of them is the one we work with in Lyons, and that can be a burial without a vault. So it's consistent, but most of the Jewish burials I know of in Boulder, they've had to use a vault.
I see. So if I were comfortable with being in a non-consecrated
well, that's the point. You'd have
that would be
to
Lyons, but what you do is consistent with everything up to that point. And then I missed
acceptable.
Yeah, so I missed the beginning, but when you do a green burial, do you put the body in a box or just in a sheet?
Either. So a sheet, a winding cloth, a constructed shroud, or a cardboard box, or a pine box made in Longmont. Like that, those are our burial containers. Nothing, no metal, nothing else.
So the pine box is free of metal.
Correct.
Wow. So that
optionally, the box is constructed with pegs, and then it's optional. The lid is it's typically affixed with 6 metal screws. However, in scenarios where a person is adamant that there be no metal, we simply use 6 wooden pegs.
And sorry, I just wanted to say that Daniel Ziskin, who is not on this call, who's a co-owner, is a member of the Jewish community. So, he's very familiar.
Okay, good. Well, he probably knows more about it than I do, but we are thinking of this, and we're not Orthodox. So some combination would
I heard that.
Yes, it would work well. So should we set up a tea, or is that something we do offline? Okay.
Well, you can email us. We'll remember you. Elaine, right?
Yeah, well, it's Elaine and Peter Simon.
Okay.
Thank you, Peter and Elaine. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Please
so much.
come for tea.
It will.
Okay. Seth and Karen, there are a lot of Jubus or Buddhist, former Jews who are Buddhist in Boulder County. What's your experience with the Buddhist ceremony? Have you been doing those?
I mean, it depends on whether you're working under the guidance of whether you're more sort of free-form Buddhist, and if you want to keep the body at home, then we're totally supportive of that. You know, whatever ritual you want to handle, we're there to be your support team, right?
So we can, you're open to any kind of tradition and ceremony and to support the process in the family.
We've had the
Yes, we have. We made an intentional decision because we're individuals, from different backgrounds, and our funeral home is doesn't have much religious symbolism, because our goal is that whoever walks through the door feels comfortable, and we want to affirm that we can meet them where they are in their religion or spirituality or identity. And so we absolutely, without exception, honor anyone who walks through the door.
It's a funny thing that you guys are doing, because you're honoring every spiritual tradition and promoting a spiritual process, but you have to sort of be vanilla or neutral to allow anyone to be comfortable. So I like the idea, Karen, of the British tea ceremony as an entryway.
Yeah. Yes.
Some of the most amazing rituals and ceremonies that have unfolded have been through families who've walked through the door saying, I remember an anonymous family who said, "We are devout atheists, we're devout," and the poetry and the music and the storytelling and the expression and the dancing and the instruments that evolved were magical. And so really beauty is created in any form.
And it all comes down to it's an opportunity to show love, and that's really spiritual. The essence of spirituality is to act out of love, right?
Trina, we're working on that. Your question that you put in the chat regarding regarding expanding, we're trying to build a model that can be replicated, and we're trying to build an offering that is way bigger than our idea, and hopefully outlives us by generations. I'd
love to be a guinea pig for that whenever you're needing one to start what you're doing in expand what you're doing here in California.
We can talk more, I know.
Let's have a Zoom tea.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyone else before we proceed with our day? We're love any other questions, but we also don't want to artificially hold you.
Barry.
I have another question, but I want to leave room for other people. Deborah, do you have something you want to say?
Yeah, I think you mentioned Grand Junction at one point. Just curious who you're connected to on the Western Slope.
They're named Mesa Mortuary.
How do you spell that?
Mesa, M-E-S-A, like the Mesa table that's on the Western Slope. It's called Mesa Mortuary.
Okay, and what is your connection? Do you dispose?
We are simply the wholesale provider. So that's not a branch of the Natural Funeral. And Mesa Mortuary does not, they have a different price point. They do not offer reverent body care. They use different celebrants, and they work out of an entirely different facility that we have no control over. We are simply their wholesale provider for the actual water cremation process. So they sell it, and they do the transport and all of the mortuary services. they are a client of the business entity that I mentioned that's called Alkaline Hydrolysis of Colorado. That's our physical crematory location. And it only sells services to funeral homes, to other mortuaries. So the Natural Funeral is a customer of that facility, just like Mesa Mortuary in Grand Junction, or Feldman in Denver, or Harwood in Canyon City, or Goes Mortuary in Fort Collins.
And do they transport the bodies to you?
They transport the bodies to our crematory in Arvada. They do not transport the bodies to the Natural Funeral Home in Lafayette.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, because it's for the water.
Right.
Yes.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's our only business relationship with those firms, is that they can put water cremation on their price list at any offering, and they provide all the services, the memorials and the transports and the vital records filing. We're just their behind the scenes operator who we cremate their bodies in the liquid in the water cremation vessel, and then they do all of the client interfacing.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, of course, Deborah.
I'm a retired spiritual director and counselor. Do you, and hospice trained also. Do you use volunteers?
We do. We are trying to develop something that's a hybrid between a volunteer and an internship program, because people come to us for different reasons, and one is a volunteer service motivation, and one is like an educational internship, and we're building a hybridized program. And I would say that would be an awesome topic for us to talk about over tea as well. So Joan, I'd love to explore that with you.
Okay, I'll do that.
We did. And one thing pre-COVID, we were hosting grief groups, poetry through grief, and sound healing and storytelling. We had all of these groups because we really want to be a community resource. And then of course they ended, some went to Zoom for a bit, but you know, we're hopeful that we can become a community hub again.
I didn't quite hear everything you said. You're much more quiet.
Yeah, I'm not quite as, I don't project as much as my colleague here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think I heard you say something about some grief work.
We used to host groups.
Okay.
At our center here for poetry, for sound healing, for storytelling, and we hope to host them again.
Oh, I'd love to be a part of that. I would.
Great.
So, okay.
If anyone said, we have a mailing list, it's not overwhelming, it's not solicitous, it's more informational, and it's more of a community outreach. And if you were to, I put the email address, info@thenaturalfuneral.com. If you have any interest at all in being on that mailing list, or when you write us to set up a tea time, let's include you on that, because that's a great way that our circle gets to stay informed. Okay.
Barry,
the last thought I wanted to throw at you, maybe a little bit of a difficult question, but if you think for a moment from your Naropa backgrounds and the psychotherapy perspective, I wonder what you could say in regards to how what you've been developing and promoting has affected how people grieve and the process of dealing with death and dying, because outside of the mechanics of what we do with the body and what the family does, there's the whole process of helping people through, which is what you were just talking about in regards to providing those groups and that personalized service. What can you say about the grief process?
Well, I would say that there's something different about an outsourced experience versus a participatory experience. And there's and so if you just conceptualize how do I heal when someone else is doing the work, you can make the correlation that if I'm participatory and I'm hands-on in the acknowledgement of my beloved's passing, well, I'm just invited into the healing maybe sooner than I would have been had that whole experience been outsourced. And it's integrated in a different way when a family gathers around and washes a body and then helps the funeral home, to dress their beloved in something that's special and meaningful. That I don't want to say we're offering a prescriptive therapy, but we're inviting their access, and often that initiates a type of healing that they wouldn't have expected to encounter at a funeral home. And I think the other thing that's really important, well, there are a lot of things that are important. You asked a pretty deep question there. But another thing that is, of course, important is just empowering families and giving them options. When I walked through the door of the funeral home, I knew we were going to bury my brother Sam because that's what we did with the people in our family. And the funeral home director looked up me and looked up my family file and said, "Oh, y'all bury and you use this cemetery. And this is the gauge metal coffin that we used when your dad died. Is that what we should use with your brother?" And it was sort of a presentation of a menu. Here's what we think you should pick. And when you give someone an option, when they feel powerless otherwise to the events going on around them, and you tie that option to something that's meaningful to the person who just died, such as ecological or simple or spiritual or non-spiritual, and you give the people the power to create something that's meaningful to them, you kind of can't help but be a part of their healing journey.
Well said. I have,
Excellent.
yeah, nothing to add.
So I think we need to close here. I want to just say that because the two of you shared your personal stories at the beginning, it kind of pulls it full circle, because you're extending that personal experience that you both longed for in your personal lives with losses, and now making it available for people, any of us, to be able to personalize and to have a deeper, meaningful, spiritual, therapeutic experience. So it's a very important gift that you guys are providing. And I'm so glad that we were able to have you featured here today. Just as a little commercial, we're going to make this recording of this session available and post it on our webpage, where the link that we've already advertised will remain. And for those of you who may not have been introduced to Interface before, we've been doing these presentations for over 40 years. If you'd like to get on the mailing list and attend future ones, like the one coming up next month with the Executive Director of the Parent Engagement Network of Boulder County, you can go to our webpage, interfaceboulder.org, and you'll see links to get on the mailing list and the upcoming presentations. So even though we're all muted, or most of you are muted at this point, I just want to thank Karen and Seth for this presentation. The time went very quickly, and I so appreciate the efforts that you've made in bringing this information to us. So thank you so much.
Rich put a question in the chat that I don't think was answered. Rich, do you want to ask that question about coordinating with medical agencies and donating bodies and reburials?
Yeah.
Do you want to answer it? I've got
Well,
a concise, I think.
So you then go with the flow.
Okay. So body donation is typically, it splits into two categories. And one is full body donation, where the whole body is typically donated and it is returned to a family already cremated, like a flame cremate, and the cremains are returned to a family. The other type of donation is a partial body donation or organ donation, where or tissue donation or a cornea or retina donation. And so on the partial body donations, we absolutely receive a lot of those. And so that we help families document. You can do a partial body donation, and we actually facilitate that sometimes on site here at the Natural Funeral. So we sometimes bring decedents into our care and then meet the medical team here at our receiving center when timing is of the essence. And then a donation occurs, and we can even proceed with reverent body care. We often post donation still gather families around the body, the remains, and hold ritual and ceremony and burial or cremation. So depending on whether it's a whole body donation or a tissue donation, that would inform how we can proceed.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, team.
Thank you.
Take good care, everybody. See you next month.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.